I had to do this video. I didn't want to in a way because I feel like James Kennedy at 31 years old has come a long way. I mean, he got sober for a little while, California sober, and then he went back to drinking alcohol, which obviously concerned his mom a lot. More on her later. There's obviously James struggles with some things for sure. And I do think a lot of it has to do with the way he was raised. In a sense, he had a really crazy upbringing. I mean, so did I, so I can relate to this type of character. But, when you have a difficult youth, it's very easy to go to the dark side. And you have to constantly be checking yourself and saying, okay, am I doing the right thing? Am I in control? All those things. Well, it turns out that James didn't always have control. And when he loses control, that's when he enters the dark side. So I figured something out recently and I wanted to share it with you all. I've been sort of hard on Kristen Doty on my channel, not by really dragging her too hard, but a little bit. And I think I dragged her because I always felt like she wasn't always coming from the best place. So I've been a bit hard on Kristen Doty. She's had a rough ride too. She's made some really bad decisions, as you guys all know. She got fired off Vanderpump Rules for some of them. But she's had it tough too. She was R word. I read her book recently. She's had awful relationships with men. There have been a lot of older men that have taken advantage of her when she was young. And she has been in a lot of abusive relationship with men, including Sandoval to a degree. Not physically abusive in his case, but mentally abusive. And then you add to it that she had a boyfriend that she talks about in her book that physically abused her. I think I'm going to show you that section. Here's the book that I'm talking about. So I found this blurb in People, which I think sums it up better than the book. So let me read this to you. Kristen, this is about. Kristen says she was in an abusive relationship. In a chapter called My Darkest Hour, Doty opens up about what she describes as verbal and physical abuse from someone who began as her, quote, fun rebound fling. And after her split from Sandoval, he was jealous and possessive. He put me down in public and blamed me for all his problems, she writes of the boyfriend. And then it escalated. Broken furniture, shattered picture frames and mirrors, doors slamming, and holes punched in my walls. Once that line was crossed, it was only a matter of time before he put his hands on me, shoving, pushing, and physical restraint. After breaking up and making up many times, she finally hit the breaking point and ended things for good. People ends with this. She has not identified who this boyfriend was and never brought any formal charges against him. Well, I'm pretty sure I know who it is, and I'm pretty sure that it explains a lot of the behavior from the cast members at the reunion. So what I want to tell you guys is, I don't know if you noticed, but James Kennedy kept screaming at the reunion, when he did bad things. He was 21, he was 21, he was 21, and he was young. Well, he was 21 when this incident would have occurred with Kristen Doty. Here you go. These aren't always right, but this one I think is pretty accurate. Yes, I will get into that George Michael is James Kennedy's godfather, because he is. But James Kennedy dated Kristen Doty from 2013 to 2015. So James was very young. But see, I sense that the cast is really afraid of a repeat in behavior that isn't just his yelling or screaming or being out of control in front of everyone and doing crazy stuff, because it's great TV, obviously. I kind of sense this real fear. And I really feel like the conversation that Lala Kent had with Allie was a way for her to tell her on camera that she's worried about this part of James, although she loves him deeply as a friend. It's obvious. And I want to tell you where I think this is coming from. So you guys may not know this, my Patreons do, but Thea from Your Moms Are Watching and I have become friends, and we were in the same circles coming up in Hollywood at the exact same time. In fact, her brother and one of my best friends were best friends. So that's how small a world it is, but very Hollywood situation. Anyway, Thea used to be Julia Roberts, one of her production associates. She worked in the company with her, and she's done many, many careers, and she's very established in her entertainment industry background that she has, and which is why I respect and appreciate her so much and why we collaborate a lot. So anyway, I noticed this week because I was getting ready for our live we're doing on part 1 and part 2 of Real Housewives of New Jersey, season 13, this week, Tuesday night at 9 p.m. East Coast time. If you guys want to join, Thea is probably going to be brought up this week on the show. Well, anyway, I was watching Thea's feed because we're doing all this together, and I happened to notice this post. She says, I'm telling you guys, the James abuse stuff is going to come out. Maybe that's even the bombshell that Raquel tells Andy. James hit her when she said she bumped her nose. All I know is Kristen stayed at my friend's house one night because James hit her. She was hiding from him. True story. I think when Kristen refers to it will all come out about James, that is what she is referring to. So as you guys know, I sell a shirt called Nosy, See You Next Tuesday. And there's a reason for that because I'm pretty damn nosy. And I know a lot of Thea's friends. And I know the friend that this came from. And this friend is very reliable. And I know she knows. So I know this is true. And I know the mysterious person in Kristen Doute's book that abused her physically was James Kennedy. Anyway, my concern, of course, for Kristen Doute is that she has not told anybody it was James because she didn't feel like she would have support because of all of the really crappy things that have happened over the last, I don't know, millions of years that they've all been on TV together. Because obviously, you know, she cheated with Jax and she had that incident where she got fired and all this stuff, right? So it's hard to say like this really awful thing happened to me and share a vulnerable thing like that with the world, knowing that everybody's going to call out all these other things. But see, I don't act like that. So you guys, I don't act like that because I know what it is to be physically abused. And my best friend on Real Housewives of Beverly Hills season 2 at that time was being abused by Russell Armstrong, if you remember. And I went through that whole thing with her, and I was one of the only people on the show that had her back regarding this, although the optics of the edit seem otherwise, but that is the truth. And this kind of thing really hits home for me, and I'm so sorry, Kristen. Reality Blurb posted this the other day. Kristen Doute claims James Kennedy has, quote, dark truths that will come out, reveals where she stands with the Vanderpump Rules cast, and alleges she was manipulated by production and LVP in the Miami Girls situation. Well, let me just tell you something. Notice the word dark. The word dark exactly matches the title of the chapter that she put in her book. That was intentional. Kristen's no dope. James has recently been given the honor of the #1 guy in the group on Vanderpump Rules, talking about season 10 this season, after co-stars Sandoval and Tom Schwartz hit a very public dip in popularity among fans during season 10. Kristen, whose tumultuous relationship with the DJ was well documented on Pump Rules, isn't buying James' quote good guy act. Quote, I am close with everybody that is an OG cast member, Kristen revealed on May 29th episode of Good Guys podcast. So that does not include James Kennedy. And I mean, currently I'm obviously not friends with Tom Sandoval, she added. That is a hard no. It's not going to last long, Kristen continued. He can ride the wave this season because why is he the #1 guy in the group? Because he's the only one not screwing up this particular season. Wow, congratulations. You're a grown man and you have one good summer of not messing up as bad as everybody else. But then she says, the truth will come out. It's cut off at the bottom. And it is hard for me to say that because James Kennedy is great TV, no doubt, funny, super funny. I laughed at all his jokes. I was repeating poo-poo head and all this stuff, but there is a dark side to James Kennedy. And I do believe that was what Lala was warning Allie about on the show because Lala knows it exists too. And so do the other cast members. So they just don't talk about it. And they probably don't talk about it to protect James because they've gotten very close with him and they probably understand that he has a few broken things inside him, which I would imagine have to do with this. So without going into too much detail, this is Andros Giorgio. This is James Kennedy's dad. And he came up with George Michael. They both were in the music industry at the exact same time. He was best friends with George Michael. It was reported second cousins. I'm not sure if that was true or if they were just so close they called each other cousins. But essentially, they were very, very tight. He was devastated when George Michael died. He said that George Michael was using hard drugs at the time, which, his drug use got out of hand. Well, needless to say, in the music scene in London, coming up, it was definitely a fast lifestyle. Now, there was a scene a while ago on Vanderpump Rules where James is screaming at his mom in the phone. He says, "He's your ex-husband, my father," because he's looking for money from his mom. Clearly, James doesn't want his mother talking about his father, so apparently she must have said something negative about his dad. When they meet in person, his mother asks James, "Was I a shitty mother?" When he doesn't answer, she reminds him, "You took your effing first steps at Tiffany's. Is that a good thing?" Like, in other words, I gave you a really big lifestyle. She's been on the show a few times, and she's American born, although she obviously spent a lot of time in the UK with her husband, and they ended up moving to Ibiza when James Kennedy was only 14 years old. I'm going to show you that in a minute. But so anyway, it says her husband, Andros Giorgio, who used to be in the music business with childhood friend George Michael, met Sir owners Lisa Vanderpump and her husband Ken a few years ago through Bruno Tonioli, judge of Dancing with the Stars, who's an old friend of Lisa's. Andros and Jacqueline asked Lisa to give James a job, and they did 5 years ago as a busboy on Vanderpump Rules. This is Bruno Tonioli from Dancing with the Stars, so you could recognize James Kennedy did this article, and in it he tells some surprising information about his childhood, which probably is good for his DJ career to disclose this, because it kind of like ties him to the Ibiza scene, which the highest paid DJs in the world perform at Ibiza, and Pasha in particular. Then he goes on to talk about his childhood, and this is where I got the missing piece I was looking for, because it turns out that his dad was actually not just George Michael's best friend, music producer, possibly cousin, but he was also his manager. Now, George Michael partied his ass off in the UK, which essentially means, let's call it mid-tier drugs. You know what that is, right? Pasta, since we're talking about Vanderpump Rules, would be one of them. A lot of pasta. Big pasta eaters in the UK, okay? And in addition to that, like LA loves pasta too. But then also, George Michael was in the harder core drugs as well. This would have been really, really intense, because this would have been Uncle George to James Kennedy. Well, he wasn't James Kennedy back then. He was James Giorgio, but you get the idea. And I can only imagine the environment around James as a young man. I mean, it's pretty easy to imagine the kind of parties that was happening at the time, with George Michael, and that's James Kennedy's dad. All of these are, by the way, when he was young. Yeah, I mean, come on. It was a good time. Definitely probably not the most stable environment. Remember the binge drinking scene with James Kennedy and his dad saying, he was really proud that he was sober, but then they laugh about binge drinking? It sort of explains this, what I've just told you. This is going to really blow your mind and explain a lot. At 14 years old, London-born James Kennedy found himself standing in the basement of Pasha Ibiza, watching Cypress Hill. His world transformed as he watched the light show captivate clubgoers and the energy heighten at the peak of the drop. He found himself immersed in everything that an electronic live show could be, and so James Kennedy's lifelong pursuit of being a DJ and music producer began. Kennedy is part of the contingent of artists including Zed and Dylan Jagger Lee, who were born into a musically inspired upbringing. His father was English singer and songwriter George Michael's longtime manager. As Kennedy explains, he didn't know Michael as anyone other than Uncle George for many years. Music and everything that came along with the industry was second nature for him, as he recalls being nothing short of addicted to artists like The Prodigy. I mean, let's face it, guys. I mean, they sell ecstasy and pasta on the beach openly at all times of the day in Ibiza. Let me show you Pasha really quick. It's fabulous. You should go, but wait till you're older than 14. There's the world famous Pasha. The turning point for his desire to become a musician himself was when his parents came home to London after a week-long vacation in Ibiza. His parents announced that they had purchased the house they had vacationed in. Okay. And a week later, he found himself in his new home in one of the biggest markets for electronic music in the world. So imagine you're like in your young teens and your parents are like, I'm going to move you to the party capital of the world with no notice. Like, what does that say about what your life was like in the UK, right? He shares, it was that time where I was sneaking out of the house trying to get to Ease, Paradise, Amnesia, Pasha. And I saw Tiesto, I saw David Guetta, I saw Cypress Hill in the basement at Pasha at 14 years old. So he's going to like the most famous nightclubs in the world at 14. Hello, Dana Wilkie. Hello, Paris Hilton. Hello, Drew Barrymore. Okay. And it was unbelievable. And that is what changed my whole view on wanting to be a DJ. I wanted to be the guy who is making that sound and dancing up on the podium. So now you got to turn on your speculation and your intuition, and you have to sort of think about why James Kennedy might be broken in some of the ways that everybody criticizes him for. Possibly it's because he had a crazy youth. And not only that, but he was going to nightclubs that are the most drug-infused nightclubs in the world. Guy is coming up and self-medicating and having fun since he was very, very young. Not parented, obviously, even though he's sneaking out. I'd say it wasn't like a tight leash, and so this makes James Kennedy. And I don't know, maybe if you add to that there is something that makes him very hyper and all this stuff, which I don't know what that is. I'm not a doctor. Maybe he's got a chemical imbalance of some sort, and then he's taking drugs and self-medicating, and he loses impulse control. You ever hear of the beer monkeys? I have them. Not today, but I've had them. Probably has huge regrets, but he can't control it when it happens. I'm just speculating. But looking at his behavior on the show, I'd say that makes a lot of sense, going to the bathroom 85 times, although we joked around and said, he was probably doing pasta in the bathroom. Obviously, that's not what he was doing. But he definitely was getting up because he was losing control in some way and having to keep leaving. Anyway, this gives you a lot of insight into a few things. Why Kristen Doty is saying a lot of things that she's saying, is feeling how she's feeling about Ariana and Tom Sandoval and all this stuff. Why the cast members seem to be bending over backward to get like secret messages to Allie, or toned down or watered down messages to Allie. And yeah, so I'm going to leave that there with you to do with it what you will. I don't like to convert people on their thinking in one way or another. I think that's toxic. I try to just give you my opinion and the information for you to decide what to do. Seems to me both James and Kristen could use a little support and help. All right, you guys, like, subscribe, and hit that notification button. You never know what you're going to get on my channel for damn sure. Nosy. See you next Tuesday.